Hello, Barry.
Hi, Adam. I'm there's a wait a minute. I have to accept it. Hold it. Okay, start again.
Hello, Barry.
Hi, Adam. How are you?
Pretty good.
Your new digs.
Getting set up. Yeah,
Good. I hope everything goes well there.
thank you.
Johns Hopkins. It's a great place.
I think I'll enjoy it. You know.
Good.
So you were just telling me about so last week you were talking about this analogy of this 8 hertz place where it's like it seems like it's ambiguous between alpha and theta, but it's not just ambiguous, but it could potentially be like a special frequency. And you use an
Right.
analogy of like changing transmission in like a manual car. And
Right.
you're
Yeah. Well, for the sake of people who are not familiar with driving a manual transmission, normally you shift from first to there are 4 or 5 gears, 5 or 6 gears, depending on the car, and so you start out in first gear, in which case the engine that's maximum torque, which means that you start up, you don't have any inertia. If you're starting from zero velocity of the car, you have high inertia, zero inertia. And then, so you need maximum torque. So maximum torque is the engine revs fast, and your car velocity is very slow. So when you multiply the amount of energy generated by the engine times the slow velocity, you have that's the force that you generate. So you get started in first gear. It's a low gear, but if you step on the accelerator, the engine is going to go very fast. If you floor the accelerator, the engine is going to go very fast, but you're not going. The car won't go at very far or very fast. It's a lot of engine activity, but low velocity of the car,
so
and
theoretically
that's
let's
because
like maybe call this the delta mode, or
the
maybe
delta. Well,
or
that's
just like
sort. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, okay, that's the delta mode. And then if you shift into second gear, then the engine can slow down a little bit, and your velocity is faster. So you make that shift between less of an engine work, because you're already moving. You have moving inertia, and so the engine doesn't have to go so fast, and you are going. The velocity of the car is actually going faster. So that's like
you can start like
theta mode.
maneuvering and taking particular like taking your car. It's starting to handle. Like at first you're just getting going, but now it's actually you can like go
Now
places
you're
with it.
moving. Now
So
you're
let's maybe
moving.
call this the theta mode.
This is more like the theta mode. Yeah.
Maybe.
And then when you're really moving, okay, now you shift into third. So the engine doesn't go, you can have the engine going even slower, and your velocity is going even faster because you have more inertia. And so it's that pattern. So that's more like the alpha mode. And then you shift into when you're going at a fairly good clip, maybe 40 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour, no, 40, say, you shift into fourth gear, and then the engine goes still slower and you go still faster, and go higher. And it's when highway, or roads, you go into fifth gear, uh, and the engine goes even slower, but you're going faster. And then sixth gear, that's on super highways. So the engine is going at a fairly low speed, but you're going at a very high speed. But if you try to start, if you start from zero and you try to start the car in, say, fifth gear, then you have to slide. You have to let the clutch up very slowly to gradually allow the very high, the low torque to let the car slowly get going, and you have to race the engine, and you actually going very slowly in fifth gear. So it's very
That's me before
inefficient.
coffee.
Right, exactly.
Me before my
That's me
morning
before,
coffee.
and me before my morning coffee. You can't get started. You can't get started if you're expecting to go, at super highway speed.
I might call that the oh God, why mode.
Okay, so, but say fourth or fifth gear is more like gamma, the gamma frequency. Okay, so that's the analogy. Now, the reason I bring that up and why I say, and probably a lot of people know what a clutch is, theoretically, what a clutch is, it helps you shift. But the reason I bring it up is that when
Thalamus and
you,
brainstem?
what?
I just wonder, like would thalamus and brainstem be analogous to the clutch? I was wondering.
I don't know.
I don't know, or striatum? I don't know. Let's keep going.
I haven't thought of what that analogy would be, what the clutch
I like pushing
analogy.
analogies really far, like as far as I go until they break.
Yeah, but well, let me first get to where I wanted to go, and then we can discuss where the clutch is in the brain,
Yeah.
if at all. And so the reason I press this analogy is that for people who haven't become expert at driving a manual transmission car, which is otherwise known as a stick shift, when you get good at it and you have a sense of your own car, the car and the momentum and the engine speed and the velocity, when you have all those intuitively, you have a sense, you hear the engine speed, and you know your speed relative to the road. It's possible to shift gears from first to second, and second and third, third to fourth, fourth to fifth, fifth to sixth, at all different speeds and engine speeds, but it's possible to shift between gears without using the clutch.
Everything
And
just flows.
everything, so at a certain speed, so you say you start and you can't really not use the clutch in first. You have to start with the clutch, so you get the engine connected to the first gear, and then when you're going at the right speed, you can just slide the shifter into second gear without the clutch, and then you're going a little faster, and you have the right sense of speed and engine speed, and you slide the gear shift into third and into fourth and into fifth and into sixth. You can do that if you have a good sense of your car and the speed and the engine sound and all that. And so the reason I say that is that in relation to brain activity, and specifically we were talking about the relationship between theta and alpha. So theta, theoretic, the range of theta is say 4 to 7, but it can go a little bit higher. I've seen in rats it can go as high as 9 per second. When they're really paying attention, when they really have to make a decision, like particularly if they're at the edge of a table and looking over the edge, the theta, which is highly synchronous rhythmical activity at 9, it goes at 9 per second. And also that 9 per second is if they're standing up, standing up a wall, looking to, just standing up against the wall.
But like the foraging for information potentially, like there's something there they want to know.
Foraging for information, yeah, exploring, obtaining information. But if they're just exploring on the surface of the table, then it's about 7 per second. So you get a higher speed of theta when they're really looks like them trying to make a decision, or trying to get information to make a decision. That's what it looks like intuitively when you look at the animal. Now, the alpha,
Is the power higher as well? It's like so that you're saying
Yeah,
it's much,
well, yeah, the
so both a
synchrony,
faster
the
phase
more
and a higher
synchrony,
power.
the more synchronized, the theta wave is more highly synchronized. So yeah, it's a smoother, higher amplitude theta at 9 per second. Yeah, it meaning that there are more synchronous units firing. And then the alpha, the theoretical limits of the alpha, the definition limits are about it's usually about 10 to 12, but it can go down to 8 and maybe up to 13. I don't know, but
Like if you're really aroused, maybe, or something. Or would it
or
not be arousal that would push
really
you to
not
breaking?
but really maybe really
The zone?
grooving on your thoughts or something. um I'm not sure
Oh,
what actually can influence the rate of the alpha, but
okay, I really want to know that.
yeah, well, that's a good question. It's a good empirical question. I don't know, but the point is that because the range can go from of theta can go from 4 to 9, and the range of alpha can go from 8 to 12. That means that there is a point at which the two are going at the same rate, between 8 and 9 per second. That can be both the theta and the alpha can be both going at the same rate. Now, if that's the case, at that point, if you have theta and alpha both synchronized at the same rate, it means that information that theoretically, I mean, my speculation is that you can easily slip between the system that is being represented by theta and the brain system that's being represented by theta and the brain system that's being represented by alpha. Now, let's say, just theoretically, that the system represented by theta is the internal system, the visceral system, uh, involving gut responses and olfaction. That, I mean, the olfactory brain is that's typically the rhinencephalon, and the classic idea of the rhinencephalon is where the theta rhythm occurs. That's the olfactory system, and that's related to more visceral sensations, taste and gut sensations.
More related to homeostasis, like
More related to
highly
homeostasis, right? Okay.
organismically salient information, highly
Yeah,
integrative, related to
right,
the
right.
overall status of the organism and its goals,
Right. But the alpha is more related to the somatic system,
including the
the
goal of staying alive,
what?
including the goal of staying alive.
Which, the theta or the
Theta, yeah,
theta?
like the vital
Yeah,
signals,
the
like the
vital
things,
signals,
you know.
vital signals.
But
And
alpha, you're
the
saying, is this more like
alpha is
proprioceptive engagement.
more proprioceptive engagement, or more interaction with the outside world. Visual visual sensitivity changes with the function of the alpha. Visual reaction time is fastest as Donald Lindsley showed. Uh, Reaction time is fastest in response to a flash of light, a strobe flash. The reaction time to press the lever, press the button for the humans, is fastest at the peak of the alpha wave. So that means that there's an integration of visual and somatic activity, finger press, and just a decision to make the response that is more um, uh, linked to the external world. So maybe at this point of synchrony between the alpha and the theta, you can move, information can pass readily between the visceral system and the somatic system, the internal world and the response reaction to the outside world. That not only can information pass readily, but there could be a confusion. I mean, in other words, a fusion between them. That there's a they're both on the same page. Both the internal and external um, processing is uh, uh, integrated, meaning it's one and the same. it
So
becomes one. It becomes unity. So one
okay,
is affects the other, and the other affects the other, and one responds to the other, and the other is. I mean, there's response. There's communication, immediate communication, easiest communication. It's like the moment at which you can shift the move the shifter from one gear to the next.
so a few things are coming to mind here. Um, one I want to come back to just because it keeps bothering me is now I'm wondering whether like the actual manual transmission might be more like the frontal lobes and like the thalamus and brainstem would be more, with maybe help from the cerebellum, would be more like the highly rehearsed automatic transition, but you can't like, you don't have the exquisite control. But we'll come back to that. But like just want to correct maybe what I was saying earlier. But what you're describing now, there's a few like studies I've read not too long ago that are coming to mind, but one is just very strongly resonating with me with like the phenomenology of flow, like this
Hmm. Yeah,
inner
yeah,
and outer
yeah.
engagement.
I read a little
Your,
bit about flow.
you're like your heart,
Interesting concept.
if things feel right as you're doing them, like the
Right.
feeling and the action are
Yeah, yeah.
harmoniously integrated. And this is like associated with like, like peak experiences, but also this
Mm.
moving between inner and outer attention, consciousness of like more interoceptive or exteroceptive, sometimes them being like harmoniously bound, but even like a kind of confusion. Now I'm also wondering about like maybe some of the phenomenology of bonding and like things like people dancing together, singing together, having sex
Yeah.
together, like
Well,
maybe
I
some
don't I
part of
don't
that.
I don't remember if I told you that I remember one time I was experimenting with, being very impressed with in the rat work, being very impressed with the synchrony between the heartbeat, the sniffing behavior, and the theta waves, individual heartbeat, all going at 7 per second. The sniffing movement when they're doing the exploratory sniffing, inhalation, and whisking the whiskers forward and back. That's each whisk there's 7 whisks per second, and 7 inhalations per second, and 7 heartbeats per second, and they're all synchronized, and 7 theta waves per second. They were all synchronized. They're all in synchrony with each other. It's like that was flow. That's like flow. I mean, I thank you for bringing that up, because the concept of flow is uh, like flow is the moment when you can slide the shifter from one gear to the next, from first to second, second to third, etc. So that I like that idea of flow when I'm thinking of this time. So I was thinking that thinking about the heartbeat, there's also evidence that when during locomotion, the heartbeat is synchronized when the heartbeat is synchronized with the movement, with the leg movement. And this was shown. There's an early study by Coleman in 1921. It was the first paper, the first issue of the Journal of Comparative Psychology, 1921. And what he did was he went to the zoo and he looked at animals like the big cats, and he could see the neck pulsing as that
Like the
was
jugular was visible.
the jugular visible, and he could see the neck pulsing in time, and that was a measure of the heart rate. And he saw that each step that the tiger made was synchronized with one pulse of the neck. And then he also said that runners, they're running up a hill, it's difficulty, but when suddenly it becomes this ease of movement, and at that point the heartbeat becomes synchronized with the leg movement, one leg movement per heartbeat.
So that'd be like
And
your
that was the
optimal gait.
easiest optimal gait. And it reminds me of a paper by Satchel in the dogfish shark, that they make one gulp per heartbeat, and that means, and she showed that the maximum, the point of the gulp is to bring oxygenated water over the gills, and the maximum the maximum blood flow is maximum at that point when it's maximally. So it means that the shark is getting optimal oxygenation of the blood, because the blood is passing through the gills at the same maximum rate that the water is passing through the gills. So there's maximum optimal oxygen exchange. And at the same time, there's one swish of the tail of the shark. So there's a one-to-one synchrony between the gulp of water and the heartbeat and the body swing left to right,
So this
which is the main
integration of
this
neural rhythms and
of
physiological
rhythm.
functioning for like this optimal range. This is a story probably a couple 100 million years old, maybe laid down for vertebrates like
I
500
think
million years old.
I
Cambrian
think so.
explosion period.
I think so. So
Uh-huh.
I was interested in testing this. So what I did with my lover, I set up. I had two heart amplifiers, and two battery operated physiological amplifiers. So I connected up electrodes to both of us, to me and to her, and with the audio plugged into it, so we could each hear our heartbeat. And then we started making love, and when we got into the rhythm, this is not an exaggeration, our hearts beat in synchrony with each other. It was two hearts beating as one. Literally, I'm not being poetic. It was literally with the movements that we were making, the thrusting movements. It was our hearts were beating in synchrony with our movement, just like the damn shark.
Sometimes nature is kind and beautiful.
Talk about flow. That is flow. It was the easiest movement. We're both moving in synchrony, and our hearts are beating in synchrony with this easiest movement. That's flow. Now, what's happening in the brain?
How far up does this go? Like to what speed of the transmission are your engines going together?
Well, I mean, it was maybe our whole body movement. It was no faster than our heartbeat. It was if our heartbeats, well, during orgasm, we measured heartbeat during orgasm in other contexts, and a heartbeat can double in frequency. So it can go up to say 100, 130, 150 beats per minute. Normally it's about 65, 70, 60, say 60, 65
so like delta range,
per minute.
But it can go into the theta range potentially.
It can go, well,
no, not quite theta.
No.
It's low delta versus high delta.
It's much slower. It's much slower. I mean, the heart, 100, say 120 per sec, 120 per minute is 2 beats per minute per second. You know, normally in resting, it's maybe 1 beat per second, but it can double during sexual activity, as can the blood pressure. It can double, but it's synchronized with the movements. You know, if rapid bodily trunk movements, trunk and hips and legs, you know,
that's also together.
It's all synchronized.
That's all synchronized. Yeah.
And at around 2 per second, you know, that's a high frequency for the whole body to move. You know, 2 per second is something like, that's pretty fast. I don't know if you heard that.
Yeah.
It's about 2 per second. You know, 7 per second, which is the maximum, you know, this theta rhythm, this maximum, that's about as fast. You can't tap your finger much faster than 7 per second. That's about something like that. But you know, it doesn't have to be completely synchronized. It can be phase locked. In other words, what we showed in the rats was that we trained them to press a lever for food, for a food pellet, whenever they wanted at lib, ad lib. So we had the food pellets there. They could press the lever and get the food whenever they wanted it. And we recorded their theta, and we recorded the moment of the button of the lever press. We had an electric switch on this on the lever, and we also were recording their theta, their brain activity. And they were showing theta activity when they were doing the bar press, making decisions. And now the theta is going 7 per second. They would make a bar press maybe once every say variable intervals, maybe but once every 2 seconds, once every second, and then once every 7 seconds, once every 15 seconds. You know, it was very variable. But when we measured when during the phase of the theta rhythm they pressed the lever, they chose to press the lever, it turned out that they always pressed the lever at the peak of their theta rhythm. So you could have many theta waves going by without anything happening in terms of the bar press. But when they pressed the bar, it was always at the same phase of the theta. And by the way, they also released the bar at a different phase, always at a different phase of the theta. So maybe the same kind of thing happens with the bodily movements and alpha and theta and alpha, that there's when the flow occurs, maybe it's occurring at a particular phase of when the two systems, those two systems are simultaneous in their frequencies. So another implication is that maybe these systems are all going at their, maybe the internal system, the visceral system, and the somatic and the relation to the external environment, maybe those systems are all going at their preferred frequencies at all times. And they don't normally get linked to each other, but sometimes they do.
So you're
Sometimes
getting
they
this
are
harmonic
synchronous.
coupling, and
Harmonic coupling,
to call
or
it like
loosely,
harmonious.
technically it's called loosely coupled oscillators. And that's the example that you that beautiful example you showed of the metronomes, a bank of metronomes all going at the same frequency, but all out of phase with each other. And then little by little, if they have this movable platform where they can actually influence each other's movement, they're all going at different phase relationships with each other, all at the same frequency, but at different phase relationships. And then gradually they get in synchrony with each other, and then they're all going at exactly the same phase relationship. That is an example in physics of or engineering of a loosely coupled oscillators. That's the technical term for it.
And so once they achieve this regime within the rodent, that would be like the paw press at peak theta, and then they'd
That's
release it
exactly.
once the metronomes desynchronize.
Yeah, well, no,
Interesting. No,
they're still synchronized. They're just at, instead of
smaller synchronization.
instead of when the metronomes all go tick, that's when they press the lever, and when the metronomes all go tock, that's when they release the
I
lever.
see. So they're synchronized in terms of like their activity is going low. So it's the opposite. They're all excited, but they're synchronized and then losing, that's less excitation. So more excitation, less excitation. And then at the less excitation, synchronized, then
Or
you
different
release.
excitation.
Or different.
Different excitation. Maybe, I mean, yeah, you could say that the releasing the lever is inhibition, or release of excitation, but it might also be there are probably also active acts in lifting up the paw to release the lever. So it may be different active systems for pressing and for leasing. And they're also linked to each other
There's
in
this one
flow.
study I'm going to put into the notes of the video when we upload it. It came out, I think, this last year, showing that for Libet experiments where people are doing like volitional presses
Oh
of a
yeah.
button, it's more likely to occur at the exhalation. And so that seems to be kind of akin to what you're saying of like the rodent, like pressing the lever at theta, which would be a sniffing and whisking peg rhythm. I'm wondering if maybe some of that linkage, I don't know the complete account, but I'm wondering if there's some connection there with the fact that people are more likely to generate volitional actions in these Libet type paradigms also at the exhalation. And they show stronger readiness
I
potentials
didn't,
too. Yeah.
could be. I didn't realize that in his experiment that it was linked to the time of respiration.
Not in his, but in a study, I
Oh,
forget who did it, just came out this last year. I'll put in the notes.
oh yeah. Okay.
But yeah, it seems a good amount of this account you're saying was conserved in humans.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's true. And we're just animals. We're just we're part of the flow, right? I mean, where do you think we came from? We're nothing. In many ways, we're less civilized than the animals. We kill our species.
Leaves on the tree of life that we forgot that that's what we are.
We're just part of the we're just part of the flow. And fortunately, I mean, if we take advantage of the fact that we have evolved to this point, our bodily systems are there for our survival. They're adapted for our survival, and it it would benefit us to allow we were talking about this in the symposium, that if we heed our body signals are trying to they have evolved over more than 1,000,000 years in the human species, and a lot longer than that from the other mammalian species and the reptiles and all that, going all the way back.
Maybe at least 500 million probably, and maybe sooner, like in some ways. But I think maybe like a similar principle could even apply like maybe like the origins of all animals in terms of like if you think of something like C. elegans, its signaling might have the same harmonic coupling to its motion, and that would be a much older story. But maybe the
Well,
specific relations to
what,
physiology that we have that
sure,
might have gotten laid down in the Cambrian, maybe.
I mean, maybe what you're getting at, if I could paraphrase what you're saying, which I agree with, is that any time, in any situation in which it's essential to integrate the internal organism, the organism with the external environment, since all organisms interact with the environment, and the timing of whatever is going on within the organism is at a different time scale than whatever is going on in the external environment, because there are different principles and different laws involved. I mean, there's organic tissue as opposed to inorganic tissue. In the outside, the environment is inorganic tissue, a lot of it, universals, whereas the internal organs are different. It's different matter, different material. So to the extent that they have to be integrated and have survived, it means that what has evolved is mechanisms of integrating the internal environment of the organism with the external reality, with the environmental reality. So there's always, in all living organisms, there has to be integration between the internal and the external, and it can be more or less sophisticated. So
Seems
if we just
harder unless though you're like directly coupling. I'm wondering in terms of like alpha desynchronization, if like you're in like a tension paradigm and like an unexpected like oddball stimulus comes up, you actually will get like this desynchronization. I guess what I was wondering is like, actually, while the outside world, it's this challenge of creating alignment, there's also this initial challenge of creating alignment between the nervous system as controller and the harmonic modes of the moving organism, like the way you're describing for the shark, like getting those things into alignment. Like there's a challenge to build, like it's a constraint and it's tuned when it's functioning well to give you this harmonic coupling. But because like there is like an action perception cycle, like it's within the control, the scope of the control system, even though there's a challenge there of making sure you're in that zone, it's like it's more likely to get this harmonious coupling than aligning to an external rhythm, unless it's something like singing, dancing, or like the lovemaking you're describing. Like, because the external world is not like necessarily playing nice, like you're saying, like there's a challenge of it. It's not in line with what you're doing.
Yeah.
But in that like the experiment you just did or you just described, you were in alignment. And so then you were getting across the two systems, this at delta, the physiological signals were becoming synchronized. And what I'm wondering is how high up does that go? Like was your theta synced? Was your alpha synced? Like,
Well, it may be that they're not, it's not that they're synced, but maybe there are critical moments when their optimal phase sensitivities are linked. That in other words, you can't synchronize, you can't synchronize two different frequencies, but you can synchronize a moment when their optimal or the maximum phase, say their peak phase, are synchronized. Do you know what I mean? I mean, so I mean that's
you can get a cross frequency coupling,
yeah, and maybe
but
something
not
special
necessarily.
happens. Maybe something special happens when several different systems are all at a phase relationship in which they're optimally receptive and responsive to each other, when you can get flow among them. Maybe maybe that's when some special things happen, when you get some unique quality emerges. You get an emergent property
I
at
want
go ahead.
Could it be so at this like fruitfully ambiguous like 8 hertz regime or inter regime?
When I don't, when you say ambiguous, I don't,
Well,
maybe
like is
ambiguous,
it alpha?
maybe
Is
it's
it
really
theta?
ambivalent. Maybe a better term than ambiguous is ambivalent, because it means um, two things that are the same. Ambivalent,
Ambivalent.
ambivalent. Rather, um, it's not that it's unclear. It's equivalent in some way. We have to think of a different word.
Because ambivalent has like a negative like a connotation
It's,
also.
well, I mean, it's, yeah, it, well, ambivalent had negative connotation, but if you say maybe I mean, a term I've thought of is confusion, where they're fused together. Confusion in the good sense, where you can't distinguish one from the other. They're both equivalent.
So
When
where I want to
you're
go is you're talking about this fruitful confusion between your internal and external attention.
fruitful
I want those
confusion.
coupled
That's right.
across.
That's what I mean.
I want those coupled
Fruitful,
across you and your partner. I want to know if we get there in terms of
yeah,
you're entering
confusion. It's
like
definitely a
two
fruitful
people,
confusion. Yeah, it's
but
what
like a
two
confusion
is one.
across with the heart beating as one. I'm wondering if actually both people are tuned to this like fruitfully confused interregime of the inner and the outer being able to
Yeah,
harmoniously couple.
yeah.
And I'm wondering if that's not just like my inner and outer, but because we're both at that point, it's almost like a coupled
It's
Mobius strip. I don't know what to
confusion
say.
between the two.
Yeah.
It's two hearts beating as one. It's a confusion between the two different hearts, right? It's a fruitful confusion when the two hearts are going in synchrony with each other. You can't tell which is which. It's a fusion. And so, and that is when the bodies are also in the same way. So it's like two individuals as one. It's unity between two individuals. And it's a fusion
My inner and
together.
outer
It's a fusion
harmoniously united,
together.
and your inner and outer harmoniously integrated, but we're sharing the outer. And so our inners are also
Or
shared, and
also
our
shared. Yeah.
inner hearts were beating as one.
So the whole it becomes one organism, because you can't tell one from the other in terms of the timing of the activity.
That just about feels what it's like when it's good.
Then when it's good,
Yeah.
and that's flow. When there's flow, when it's complete flow between two two things that used to be one.
Before I forget, there's this one other study I'm going to put in the like description of the video.
One thing that used to be two. I said it the wrong way. I was confused.
I'm with you.
It's two things that become one. Yeah.
So I don't forget this one study. I think it was Scott Barry Kaufman and others, but it was showing that highly creative individuals were showing this stronger coupling between like default mode resting state networks and I think frontoparietal networks. And so I'm
Okay.
wondering if that's like actually creative people association with flow, whether they occupy that fruitfully confused interregime more than other people.
I think that's exactly right.
So I'll put that there too.
That's an interesting idea. Because when that happens, I mean, I would put it this way: when the resting state activity becomes synchronized with the executive function in the brain, then the executive function is resting. And what happens then, when there's no difference between those, it becomes responsive to other inputs. Because if nothing's happening there, in quotes, in air quotes, nothing is happening between the executive and the resting state. They're one. So there's no control there. They're out of control. But in the sense that they're both going together, there's no relative movement between them. And if there's nothing happening there, then it becomes a projection screen for other input to influence it. And when other input influences it, that could be creative, because it could
Just
be that
diversity. More things can come and be combined.
the visceral sensory activity and the fantasies generated that would normally be generated, the dreamlike activity that would normally be generated by the visceral sensations, all of a sudden that creates the image on this neutral screen. But the screen becomes neutral white between the executive and the resting state. So there's nothing's going on there. It's just a blank screen. And then that makes it more susceptible to a weak input from the gut sensations that can come in with a new computation. Our guts compute on a very different, they march to a very different drummer than our executive and our resting state.
But they have their own associative information.
They have
with the-
their own,
I think you
memories.
might have just explained intuition.
Well, maybe so.
I think
Maybe so.
I
With
think
your
that might
help.
have just happened.
That's what intuition is. Yeah, because you know, don't downplay the the importance of our visceral input, because our visceral input has our guts always respond to whatever is going on. And I like to, we could talk about this next week, that our guts are our um, our wish fulfillment experience, because our guts are representing the childlike, uninhibited, our childlike, uninhibited reality. And in other words, whatever happens, we can respond the way we've learned, but we also have a gut response to it, which is not necessarily, which could be a very different language and very different interpretation of what's going on. We're not allowed to express anger, but we can feel anger. And that has its own beautiful memory system, all working fine, very precise. It's very precise. Our guts have a very precise memory system. So, and very complex, just as complex as our overt responses, just not as highly. It's not as precisely defined, but it's just as strong and just as real, and it has its own connection to our memory system and our visual system, in terms of, you know, our gut sensations generate a very precise dream imagery, you know. So it's not vague at all. It's a low resolution system, but it has connection to very just as precise as everything else in our brain. So if we let that bubble up when we're in a zone of the blank screen between between the prefrontal cortex and the resting state, and that's all a blank, and it becomes responsive to the gut input, which has its own imagery, then we suddenly have some different idea.
One could say blank or maybe open to new
Open.
experiences.
Well, blank
within and
in the
without.
blank in the sense of like you know, a blank wall, a blank for a blank projection screen. It's a, you know, a projection screen is blank. So
I think of
whatever.
connections
So,
between openness to experience and creativity. I'm wondering, like, the way we use the language we use is actually pointing to this, like, negative capacity, this space that can take in all these diverse signals.
yeah,
I'm wondering if this is part of
like a
open.
projection screen.
I'm wondering if this is part of what we mean by openness to experience.
Yeah, yeah. We're not editing anything. So the blank screen, which is at a particular zone, blank, not in the sense of zero, just that there's no new information, no control, nothing going on there. So it's open, but it's open. And so our guts then turn on the projector and project onto this blank screen with nothing interfering with it. And then we're aware of that, because we're not blinded by our executive function. We're not blinded by everything else going on in our brain. We can see clearly because we're not blinded by other stuff.
So now I'm going to revisit this other study about different, I guess, personality types, and I want to look. I forget who the person's name, but it's a creativity researcher, and but connections between insight-based problem solving and personality characteristics like openness and tendencies to be sensitive to intuition and rely on intuition, and whether actually, so like you're basically providing like a fundamental biophysical account of what the way in which we integrate information of different kinds within and without. And I think some already like studies are coming to mind very consistent. I think there might be another strong one with what you're saying of people who the personality characteristics of people who tend to be sensitive to intuition and modes of insight problem solving. So I'm gonna try to find that and track that down so we can talk about
Okay,
it.
it would be interesting to see whether they have a low incidence of psychosomatic disease.
Mm.
I would predict that. They would have a low incidence of hypertension, ulcer, asthma,
Mm.
bowel, all the urticaria, this rash, all the classic psychosomatic diseases. I would predict that those people would have a low incidence of it relative to people who are alexithymic, which means that they literally don't have words for feelings.
I think you might have also just explained heart connection, or we're getting there.
Heart connection? What do you mean
It's
heart connection? What's
it's a
heart
term
connection?
sometimes used in like the New Age for like a way of being that's like sensitive to like basically your heart information.
Yeah,
It's
well,
like
yeah,
it's associated with
that's
like a different way of being in the world and a different kind of personality.
you have to educate me on all these new
My hippie
ideas, because
jargon.
all this stuff, because I can understand what they're talking about, and I say it seems to fit in with I mean, I have a different approach to it, but I'm interested in those kinds of things, because they're describing a phenomenon, or all these things that you're bringing up, you're describing phenomena, and it's a challenge for me to try to interpret them in terms of what we know about brain and body function, and evolution. So this is a very, very stimulating conversations for me, because
I'm loving this. So
me too, this is great.
so
So to be
return in a week.
continued. I
Yeah.
noticed that it's 11:59.
They'll deal with it.
You have to get going. So to be continued next week.
Next week.
Yeah. What time do you want?
Um, let's see. Shoot for 11 again.
11. Okay, sure. I think that's okay, unless otherwise, unless something else comes up. I'll keep you posted.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, Adam. Take care. Have a good week.